Almost every material that you touch has gone through some type of manufacturing to transform that product from a raw material into the product you see. As an engineer, you've probably thought about how different materials are processed, but have you ever considered the sustainability or impact of those different manufacturing processes?
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
The manufacturing sector is a large source of pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and human health hazards. We will discuss industrial pollution later in the air module, but this chart on the right shows that 22% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from industry. These industry emissions primarily come from burning fossil fuels for energy and certain chemical reactions necessary to produce goods from raw materials. The U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that in 2019, the bulk chemical industry was the largest industrial consumer of energy, following by the refining industry and the mining industry. Manufacturers are a subset of the industrial sector. That includes manufacturing, agriculture, construction, forestry, and mining. Some manufacturers use energy sources as feedstocks or raw materials in their manufacturing processes. For example, HGLs are feedstocks for making plastics and chemicals. In the manufacturing sector, basic metals, chemicals, paper, food, and non-metallic minerals are the main consumers of energy by the end use in the sector. Another big impact of manufacturing is the impact it can have on human health. The workers in the manufacturing environment and those living near the industrial complexes can also be exposed to harmful health conditions. When it comes to manufacturing work, not all workers will be injured, made ill, or affected by a danger they experience, but some will. The health problem, usually an injury or illness, may affect workers immediately or may not affect them until many years later in the future. For example, a worker may develop a skin rash within a few days after coming in contact with chemicals used to manufacture raw materials. Another worker may become sick with cancer many years after they were exposed to other chemicals. Dangers at the work are also common dangers in our communities. For example, unsafe drinking water or air pollution due to industrial waste or emissions. We've seen this happen with the chemical manufacturing corporation DuPont. After they contaminated a community's water source with unregulated chemicals, members of the community and the wildlife developed various forms of cancer. This brings up the topic of environmental justice. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regarding of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. However, this principle is difficult to enforce, and many degrees of violations exist today. One thing we can do as engineers is to promote sustainable manufacturing practices. This means considering people and the planet as well as profit. Sustainable manufacturing supplies useful goods and services to meet human needs in a manner consistent with carrying the capacity of the Earth's ecosystem. However, the thing about the manufacturing sector is that it requires absolute reductions, not just efficiency improvements. There's no silver bullet to fixing this problem. It involves a chain in both technology and behavior, and it requires us to consider alternative development strategies for the future. There are many things to consider with regards to sustainable manufacturing processes. As you can see in this graphic, manufacturing cost, energy consumptions, waste management, operational safety, personal health, and environmental impact are a few. Let's dive into it. Oh hey guys, you've caught me during my daily outdoor time. I've just been doing some canvassing of my local parks. And it got me thinking. In the time it took me to travel from my house to town, I encountered probably hundreds of different materials. But which of those materials are actually sustainable? Have you ever thought about which materials that you use or touch every day that are the worst for the environment? Could it be the steel from these monkey bars? The paper for my notebook? The concrete or asphalt that you walk on? Or the plastic from this slide? Let's find out. Industry emissions are largely from the manufacturing of materials. It's 50% of it. Can you believe that? Energy intensive manufacturing is responsible for daily items like food, pulp and paper, basic chemicals, non ferrous metals, and non metallic minerals, and so on. If you look at the hundreds of materials that humanity produces, the associated energy requirements are dominated by just a few categories. The materials with the most harmful emissions in manufacturing processes that dominate energy use in material production are steel, plastic, paper, aluminum, and concrete. This figure shows a plot ordering the energy requirements for these materials. These top five materials dominate the entire world material production sector, whether measured by energy used or carbon dioxide emitted. Energy intensity, or embodied energy, is defined as the energy required to produce a material from its raw form per unit mass of material produced. The definition of energy intensity may vary based on the scope defined, but for this lecture, we will consider it to be the energy to manufacture materials. It can be represented in the following equation, where the capital E represents the energy used to produce the material, Q is the amount of material produced, and the lowercase e is the energy intensity of the material production. The energy intensity can be measured by the energy used in the manufacturing process of that material. Harvesting and refining of materials are typically the biggest contributors to energy usage. Okay, but how does the energy intensity of the material impact emissions? Funny you should ask. In general, the carbon dioxide intensity of material production is dominated by the energy intensity of production and the implied fuel usage. The CO2 intensity, or embodied carbon, of a material can be thought of as the carbon footprint related to the manufacturing and production of that material or product. This figure shows the strong correlation between the two. The early material production processes are relatively simple. They only require harvesting, like for stone and timber, or mixing and heating, like for bricks. Metals or minerals, on the other hand, involve mining, crushing, washing, separation of the ore, and a chemical reduction process. Many metal ores are either oxides or compounds with sulfur that are converted into oxides. The reducing agent for these oxides is usually carbon, yielding a final product including refined metal from CO2 gas. Thus, the reduction process produces CO2 on top of the CO2 from the energy requirements. The CO2 emitted during the reduction, compared to that from the energy use, varies by material and technology. The ratio for cement is 1 to 1, and aluminum is 1 to 10. These are just some examples of manufacturing processes. The embodied energy and embodied carbon vary based on material. These values can be sourced from an existing database or from manufacturer's literature. If this is not available, a full LCA may be required to establish the amount of carbon emissions per unit of a given construction material. Here are the values for common construction materials from one study. You can use these values on the homework or research your own values. Different manufacturing processes will also have different energy requirements, and the energy requirement of different processes increases as the processing rate decreases. This graph shows that trend across a range of manufacturing processes. A study on German manufacturing companies showed a large part of the costs and CO2 emissions are caused by electrical energy during manufacturing. Manufacturing companies use electrical energy to produce mechanical energy to run pumps, air conditioners, air compressors, and production machines. Production machines, especially, need different amounts of energy depending on the process and state. Modern production machines combine a variety of functions like cooling, lubricants, chip removal, and tool exchange. The main function of machining the workpiece is only one of the many energy consumers. The figure on the bottom shows the energy consumption distribution during the chip removal process. The manufacturing of materials also involves a lot of waste. Many manufacturing processes use materials inefficiently, resulting in excess in-plant scrap. As you can see, subtractive manufacturing creates a lot of so-called waste material. A common term is the buy-to-fly ratio, which is the ratio between the amount of raw materials at the beginning compared to the amount of material that actually ends up in the product. When you machine away a material from a block to produce a complex part, much of the material you paid for is going to scrap. The aluminum steel industries can reuse this in-plant scrap, but that involves reprocessing the material into another form before it can be machined again. However, this extra processing requires less energy than if you were to produce raw virgin material. The amount of excess material after manufacturing can sometimes be staggering. Aerospace manufacturing can have a buy to fly ratio as bad as 10 to 1. That's crazy. That's like me buying 10 Starbucks coffees to combine them so they stay warm longer, but only drinking one coffee because after that one coffee, it's cold and I won't drink cold coffee. This brings us to material efficiency, which can be defined as the ratio of the output of products to the input of raw materials. Material efficiency can also be referred to as yield losses. Why is it important to have a good material efficiency, you may ask? Well, just by decreasing the amount of material needed during manufacturing and processing, you can get net energy savings. Also, by using less material, it can ease the demand for critical materials and minimize the use of imported and energy intensive materials. There is a large, untapped potential to reduce energy consumption early in the supply chain. And lastly, material efficiency can also correspond to the lightweighting of products, which can, on average, save 1/3 of all materials if people would optimize designs for materials and not money. There are many factors that can contribute to material efficiency. Inefficient use of materials can be caused by things like subtractive processing, which we've discussed, high purity requirements, and over-ordering. What does a good material efficiency look like? Well, additive manufacturing is a lot more efficient with material use than subtractive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is simply building a 3D object from a computer-aided design model, often by adding material layer by layer. Perhaps the most popular manufacturing process right now, 3D printing, is a great example of a good material efficiency. Though additive manufacturing has a high energy intensity compared to other manufacturing processes, it has a very low buy-to-fly ratio, and the products are usually lighter. One study on aircraft brackets showed that they were able to reach 66% total life cycle energy savings just by using additive manufacturing. The new, optimized design was lighter and used less materials, reducing manufacturing and transport energy use. Textile manufacturing is a major industry. It is largely based on the conversion of fiber into yarn and yarn into fabric. During the clothing production, lots of water is used and a lot of pollution is generated. About 20% of industrial water pollution is due to garment manufacturing. While the world uses 5 trillion liters, or 1.3 trillion gallons, of water each year for fabric dyeing alone. In addition to water consumption, research shows that the global fashion industry produced around 2.1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions in 2018, equaling 4% of the global total. Let me repeat that. The fashion industry is responsible for 4% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow.
This is equivalent to the annual greenhouse gas emissions of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. Adding to the challenge of reducing its greenhouse gas footprint is the expectation that the fashion industry will continue to grow as a result of shifting population and consumption patterns. If no further action is taken over the next decade beyond measures already in place, the industry's greenhouse gas emissions will likely rise to around 2.7 billion tons a year by 2030, reflecting an annual volume growth rate of 2.7%. Though the fast fashion industry was meant to cater to the ever-changing global trends, it is seriously out of style in the sustainability trend.
You. Ew! Get off of me! Ugh, as if!
The carbon footprint of an individual garment largely depends on the material. While synthetic fibers like polyester have less impact on water and land than grown materials like cotton, they emit more greenhouse gases per kilogram. Polyester production for textiles released about 706 billion kilograms or 1.5 trillion pounds of greenhouse gases in 2015, the equivalent of 185 coal-fired powered plants' annual emissions. So let's do a quick calculation to measure the kilograms of CO2 emitted from a decision between two shirts. You are deciding between two shirts to put your company's logo on. The first shirt is 100% cotton, and the second is 91% polyester and 9% rayon. If you plan to order 600 kilograms in fabric, approximately 100 shirts, how many kilograms of CO2 emissions are associated with each option? There are 4.2 kilograms of CO2 produced in crop cultivation and 1.7 kilograms of CO2 in fiber production per ton of fiber of cotton, 9.52 kilograms of CO2 per ton of polyester produced, and 6.2 kilograms of CO2 per ton of rayon production. First, multiply the 600 kilograms of shirt material by the CO2 of cotton, which is the combination of CO2 produced in crop cultivation and that produced in the fiber production. Then convert tons to kilograms to get 3.54 kilograms of CO2 for the cotton shirts. Next, multiply the 600 kilograms of shirt material by the CO2 of polyester and rayon, given their fiber composition of 91% and 9% respectively. Finally, convert tons to kilograms to get 5.53 kilograms of CO2 for the polyester rayon shirts. Given these calculations, which option will you choose? Are there any other factors you should consider before making your decision? While synthetic fibers like polyester have less impact on water and land than grown materials like cotton, they emit more greenhouse gases per kilogram. Remember, it is also important to consider where fabric is produced, air and water pollution of production, and the social cost of production. That concludes our talk about sustainable manufacturing of materials.